This is the Western Conservative Political Action Conference. And I heard Mr. Keene say it was, what was it, the first annual? Is that right?
Hopefully.
Okay, now we're with today one of the rare human beings that you'll ever see. He's never on camera very much. He's too busy behind the scenes doing great stuff for the state of California and conservatives and political people everywhere in the country, and we just love him so much. But this is Bill Saraceno, and Bill is someone that I had the opportunity to meet as a small child, believe it or not. And well, I was actually in college at University of Southern California.
Fight on.
Yes, sir. Even in spite of our detractors from Stanford.
A mere bump in the road.
Exactly. At any rate, I wanted to spend some time with you because this is a first-year event. We're in a very strange spot in the road. The actual mission statement of this conference is to remember the image of Ronald Reagan and all of his values. And as a result of that fact, I guess the first question I will ask you is, who is the religious or philosophical leader of the Republican Party in the United States today?
Well, I think one of the difficulty of the Republican Party.
Of the Republican Party.
Speaking as a Republican, if you narrow it that way, it's obviously the president. I mean, I think any time you have a president of a
Okay, having
party,
said that,
yes.
if it's not,
You mean conservative or Republican?
we're saying conservative conference now.
Okay, right.
So who would be our conservative leader of our nation as a Republican in the image of, or
Ronald
closest to, Ronald Reagan?
One of the difficulties that the movement has nationally is that there isn't anybody who fits that mold comfortably as of yet. And I think one will emerge, but I think it's also a problem with conservatives to keep waiting for the next Reagan. There is never going to be another Ronald Reagan. He was unique in many, many ways. That doesn't mean there won't be people who embody his values, hopefully his ability to communicate, which is one of the things that made him unique, make our philosophy non-threatening, and explain it to folks in a way that is easy to understand.
All right.
Right now, there isn't anybody on the national level.
Let's get down to brass tacks here. A guy named Newt Gingrich said he was going to run, and then he decided not to run. A guy named Fred Thompson said he was going to run, and then he decided he wasn't. Well, he's wait now he's going to run, and now we're down to like three front runners. We have Rudy Giuliani, we have Fred Thompson, and we have Mitt Romney. Those are the basic three. Now, there are some other guys involved in the process.
That's true.
But right now, based on what most people know across the country, name one of those three that you think has got a better chance.
Well, if I knew that, I'd be in Las Vegas putting my money down. Frankly, if I could wave a magic wand and make anybody president of the people that you just mentioned,
Sure.
it would be Newt Gingrich. Because I think he is, for all of his baggage, for all of his personal peccadillos, and he's got plenty of them, from a conservative idea, philosophical
Yeah.
point of view, he is far and away, he blows away the rest of the
But
field.
he's not in the game.
He's not going to run, so I
No.
can't do that. Frankly, my attitude about the Republican field, and there are some non-starters who would make great presidents, like Duncan Hunter, would make a great president. But my feeling about the Republican field is that they're all okay, but even with Thompson in it, there isn't anybody that lights my fire, which is unusual, because when you and I were starting to get active in politics, Barry Goldwater was still active,
Exactly.
Ronald Reagan was active, we had people and I've always had a year out, 18 months out of the election, a favorite for president.
Yeah.
This year I don't. They're all okay. Because for me, and I understand there are conservatives who differ from me, but for me, keeping your eye on the ball means who can beat Hillary Clinton.
Well, there you go. Now, let's step on that for a minute. One of the things that everybody seems to grasp at this moment is that Hillary and Barack Obama are going to be the team for the other side.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, let's just, for the moment,
For the argument, okay.
for the
let's
argument, for
assume
the
it
open
is.
argument, let's
assume
say
it.
Hillary and Barack
And
Obama
Barack,
are
okay.
going to be for the other side. Name your top two guys to run, or top two men, women, whoever it would be to run against that team.
Well, I would think in that case, assuming it's Hillary and Hussein Obama who are running, that I think of the top three guys you mentioned.
Yes.
I mean, put 3 names in the bag and pick 2. Although I expect Giuliani would not accept the second spot.
Right.
I think either of the other 2 probably would.
Okay.
And really, my bottom line on the 2008 elections, there are 2 things that matter: the war on terrorism and the courts. And that being the case, with various degrees of comfort, I'm comfortable with any of the top 3.
Okay, let's go back to those 2 issues you talked about.
So you give me convincing evidence that any combination of those 3, or anybody else, has a substantially better chance to beat Hillary and Hussein than anybody else, and that's where I'm going to end up.
Well, you think much like we do, and I knew that.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I knew that you were brilliant, but I didn't know you were that good.
That's sad.
At any rate, back to something that you hit on that we've got to really discuss. What's going to separate the Republicans from the Democrats as far as arguments are concerned? I mean, there are. If you'll be so kind as to name 4 issues that are Republican-based issues as opposed to Republican or Democrat or Green
Party issues. Well, I don't know if I can name 4, but I'll start.
Okay.
And the first two I just mentioned, the war on terrorism and the courts. The Democrats won't even acknowledge that we're in a war, number one. And that is a matter of survival of the country. Because if we lose the war on terrorism, it doesn't matter what your position is on life or guns or taxes or the 10th Amendment or anything else, number one. Number two, the courts. And it's almost as serious, runaway judges are almost as serious a threat to our freedoms in the long term as are the Islamofascists. So those are 2 that I would mention. And the third I would just mention is, although it doesn't get discussed in the presidential campaign, is who understands the fact that that Ronald Reagan said so eloquently, government is the problem, not the solution. And none of the Democrats do. There are a couple of Republicans you have to wonder about this. George Bush has been wonderful on the courts. He has been very good on tax cuts. But he has been awful for introducing this concept of big government conservatism, which is as much an oxymoron. And if there were any UCLA students watching, an oxymoron means a contradiction in terms, like a square circle or a round square.
This is the reason why we will get the bell back.
There can be no such big government conservatism.
Right.
Just is ridiculous. But that is what the president has introduced. That is why we lost the control of the Congress in 2006, because we were spending like Democrats. We were acting corrupt like Democrats. We went to Washington to change the city, and by 2006, the city had changed us. And the voters saw that, and that's why they threw the Republicans out, and they deserve to be thrown out.
Let's look at some supposition here. When George Bush did the No Child Left Behind Act,
Yes.
we covered him out at Ontario, and we actually thought that wasn't a bad idea.
Me neither at the time.
Okay. Then comes along this immigration issue, which is it's no 800-pound gorilla. It's a pack of 800-pound gorillas, and the country says, please close our borders, and no one listens. The president won't listen. The Congress won't listen. Nobody listens. Everybody at the local level nods their head up and down like they're a doggy in the window, and nobody does anything. What's going to happen, no matter who wins next year? What's going to happen with this immigration issue?
Well, I wish I knew. And it's easy. It's difficult to judge what candidates are saying unless you look at what they've done. And on the immigration issue, frankly, it's one where Giuliani is very weak on his record. And frankly, so is Romney on his record. That was then, this is now, they will say. But I think the immigration issue is one that is vastly underestimated as a powerful issue. It reminds me, it gets the blame incorrectly for Republican defeats in 2006. And nothing could be farther from the truth than that. The attitude, the establishment attitude about the immigration issue reminds me of the establishment attitude about Proposition 13 in 1976 and 1977. Oh, that doesn't matter. Oh, Howard Jarvis is this wild man, and he was a wild man, but he had the pulse of the people on that. And immigration cuts across ideological lines, except for the most extreme liberals. It cuts across party lines. In fact, you have an element of the Republican coalition, big business, who is aligned with the far left elements of the Democrat Party on the immigration issue. But from the middle class, the Republican base, and the Reagan Democrats, who are still out there, places like Lakewood and Bellflower and up and down the Central Valley, they understand the immigration issue because they see it every day when they drive down the street.
Now, this is an issue, though, because of this banking free fall and the credit crunch right now, all the people that were normally waiting out there at Home Depot to collect jobs every day is drying up, and there's no jobs out there for these people anymore. Are they going to naturally just go home?
No, but why should they? They can apply for welfare. Larry Elder, seriously, Elder, who is a radio host in LA, I believe he's syndicated nationally, makes the point, very libertarian point, and he is a little more moderate on the immigration issue than I am, but he makes the very good point that if we took away the social benefits for illegals here, they would go home, because the ones that are here to work, frankly, I can make a point that if they're here to work and pay taxes and obey the law, that's one set. If they're here to collect their welfare check, that's another set. And if we cut out the social benefits, the ones that we don't want would go home. But that's not going to happen anytime soon.
One of the issues, though, that they're going to say is, well, these people now are out committing crimes, robbing homes, doing illegal things that they wouldn't do if we were still in a very boom environment in our economy and still growing.
They also wouldn't be doing it if they were back where they belonged, in whatever country that is. And I don't care whether it's Mexico or Tibet or Italy, which my family came from. That's irrelevant.
Okay, now listen, let's step up this little exercise here. This is excellent. I just want to know one more thing now. Okay, we've got the biggest issue of all, based on what the Democrats will tell us, is it's this bogus, I love this, bogus, lied to, we've been lied to, we've done all about the war in Iraq. Regardless of what has been said and what has been done for 5 years, we're still there. Now, my question is, if the Republicans get in, what are they going to do? And if the Democrats get in, what are they going to do?
Yeah. As far as no Democrat has any standing to say we've been lied to, and here's why, Democrats. Do you remember this? I did not have sex with that woman, Miss Lewinsky, and I never told anybody to lie about it, not once. So they have no standing to say we've been lied to. We were not lied to. I mean, it's a basic semantic misunderstanding. Lying is when you purposely misrepresent the facts. The president and his administration have terribly mishandled the aftermath of the war. But if you go back to the intelligence that they had, then the intelligence that President Clinton and Madeleine Albright, his Secretary of State, both said that, yes, of course, Saddam Hussein, not Hussein Obama, of course Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. Every intelligence service in the world believed that, including the most reliable one, which is the Mossad, the Israeli intelligence service. If you go back and you look at the information the president had in the run-up to the Iraq war, not acting would have been an impeachable dereliction of duty.
I agree with you, but the issue at hand
your question was, what do the Republicans do?
Yeah.
I mean, I sort of, much as it makes me uncomfortable to agree with Colin Powell on anything, he did make a very relevant point about Iraq, and that's I think he called it the pottery barn rule. You broke it, you bought it.
Right.
We have to put it back together again. We cannot just walk out without having a killing fields again, like Cambodia had, and I don't think we want that on our national conscience. Whether the solution is a federal solution for Iraq, breaking it into 3 parts, or what it is, I don't know what the solution is, but we are going to be there regardless of who gets elected president. If Hillary Clinton gets elected president, if
We're gonna be
Hussein
there.
Obama gets elected
gonna be
president,
there.
if Al Gore gets elected president, we will have American military presence in Iraq in
foreseeable.
2009, 2013, Inauguration Day 2013, there will be American troops in Iraq. The
Bill
question is how
Saraceno,
many.
we've taken too much of your time, but we want to tell you something. It's just a joy to discuss all the important this stuff with you, and we're just so pleased that you could spend a little time with us here. We want to welcome Michael Reagan, who is the co-chair of the Western Conservative Political Conference here in Newport Beach, California.
Yeah.
And we can't be more pleased. We've watched you religiously almost on Fox News, and we hear you on radio as well. So we're kind of super fans.
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
At any rate, the reason why the Cutting Edge, a talk show, which we're a web-based organization, are here is because we've got something really missing in the Republican Party. And that's, this whole event has been scheduled to perpetuate and commemorate your dad, Ronald Reagan, who was the pillar of our conservative movement in this country.
Yep.
Right now, we've got three front-running candidates. We've got Rudy Giuliani, we've got Fred Thompson, and we've got Mitt Romney. Which one of those particular people, out of those three, do you think would be following in the Reagan philosophy?
You know, to really be honest with you, I don't even look at that. I look at leadership. You know, Ronald Reagan was about leadership.
Right.
When he ran for office, he didn't say, vote for Barry Goldwater.
No.
He said, vote for Ronald Reagan. He didn't say, vote for Abe Lincoln. He said, vote for Ronald Reagan. You know, he stood tall and stood above it
Right.
and showed leadership. And I think that's what needs to be done here. I try not to look at them as though there's some bit of Ronald Reagan in them, because I feel we are lucky enough to have one Ronald Reagan in our lifetimes. To try and get two is asking God for too much.
So he's sort of a mountain that
Well, he's
nobody
a
can
mountain,
climb
he's a
to.
great mountain. See,
Right,
he's a
of
great
course.
mountain. Abe Lincoln, great mountain.
Absolutely.
George Washington, great mountain.
Well, that's the
You're not going
problem.
to get another George Washington. You're not going to get an Abe Lincoln.
Right.
You're not going to get another Ronald Reagan. You have to get someone else who's now going to come in and take over in this period of time and deal with this series of issues that we have today. And I think that there's a mistake made when indeed people try to put themselves up against Ronald Reagan, because when you do, they're going to fail.
Right.
And I think Ronald Reagan knew that. That's why he didn't say, vote for me, you'll get George Washington, Abe Lincoln, you know, or someone else,
Well,
because you would fail.
Let's point to then to something that you might be able to rather look at carefully. Since we can't judge the current candidates
Well,
on the
no,
Ronald
Judge,
Reagan
it's
scale.
not the current candidates, but there's other candidates in there too.
Well, that's
there's
my
Mike
point.
Huckabee.
Right.
There's Duncan Hunter.
Right.
Tom Tancredo. There's Ron Paul, and what have you.
But none of
And-
those have got enough money, number one, and enough backing, number
Well,
two, to be elected.
And they don't, because we have allowed the dominant media, have we not, to tell us who they believe the front runner should be.
Okay.
Have we not done that?
Well-
I mean, you got Cutting Edge Radio, you're on the internet, right? I mean, Ron Paul's raised $5 million
We
by
love
being
Ron
on the
Paul,
internet.
but he's just not going
with-
to win.
Well, he may not win, but again, there's organizations out there. I'll give you an example. A couple weeks ago, Dobson,
Right.
Focus on the Family, big meeting in Utah.
Sure.
Had a few people there and told us who they're against. Fred Thompson's not Christian enough, or they don't know if he's a Christian. Mitt Romney's Mormon. And Rudy Giuliani's pro-choice.
Right.
So I'm against A, B, and C. But there's other choices. If Focus on the Family started telling us who they were for instead of who they're against, they could move someone from the bottom tier to the top tier overnight, because they'd have money, they'd have a backing of a huge organization, and they have all the volunteers you would ever need in a lifetime to move up to the second tier.
Okay, but
I
what I
mean-
would argue here is that they also have ethical responsibility, meaning that they are representing a group of people that have high values, high moral ethics.
None-
and therefore, their responsibility.
So Duncan Hunter,
is
Mike
to-
Huckabee don't have high morals?
I don't know
High
that.
ethics?
That
I
would-
do.
that's
But
for
then
them
you've got to
choose.
do your job.
Right.
Do your job, because Duncan Hunter certainly does. Mike Huckabee certainly does. Tom Tancredo certainly does.
I understand
Ron
that.
Paul I'm not intimate with, but I've known him for a long time. You got Duncan Hunter, for example,
Right.
who's been chairman of the Armed Services Committee, congressman down in
We love
San
him.
Diego. Here's a guy whose son, the day after 9/11, quit his job, joined the military. He's done 2 tours of duty in Iraq, is now on his 3rd tour of duty in Afghanistan, and filed papers to run for Congress from Afghanistan
That's where I
while
wanna
he's
go.
facing death.
That's where I want to go with this. And now my question to you is, you're just as good a pundit as anyone in the country, all right? So our question to you is really pretty specific. If you have a choice in candidates that are going to run against Hillary and Barack Obama, let's just say that. Okay, that's not in stone yet, but it's a pretty good chance.
Well, Barack Obama's not going to get the nomination, so it'll be Hillary.
No, I understand, but he may run as a vice president.
No, he
for,
won't.
Well,
You never choose a vice president that overshadows you.
Okay, who's going to beat Hillary?
Who's going to beat Hillary? I think any one of the 6 that we've got or 7 can beat her. See, everybody's like all worried about Hillary. Hillary has the media on her team,
Right.
but people need to run against Hillary, the senator, not Hillary, the first lady. We make a mistake of going against Hillary, the first lady, and blaming everything her husband ever did on her. It doesn't stick. Why don't you run against the senator? What has the senator from New York done? She has done nothing. The senator from New York. Run against her. When she opens her mouth, what does she do? She steps in it. A week ago, what was it? I'm going to give $5,000 to everybody. She came off of that. This week, it's $1,000 to everybody. And she'll ultimately come off of that. She's starting to sound silly. You need to run against Hillary Rodham Clinton. That's what you need to do. And I think that she's got enough negatives because she's a polarizing figure that, in fact, anybody on the Republican side can, in fact, go in there with a campaign, a righteous campaign to beat her.
That's our question. Which of the candidates of the 6?
I don't know, because they're all, right now, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody makes blunders. Yeah, Rudy Giuliani has his wife call him in the middle of a conversation with the NRA. Stupid.
Huh.
Whoever's idea that was, they should fire the person. Mitt Romney comes out the other night in debate and says, yeah, I'd call my attorneys if I had to go into Iran. Stupid. You call the Joint Chiefs of Staff. You don't call your attorneys.
Sure.
Okay? I mean, so every one of them sit there and make mistakes. Tom Tancredo, probably right. Probably won't get the nomination. He's a one-issue candidate. But he's got his issue out, immigration. And it's sticking. People are starting to wake up to the immigration issue. Mike Huckabee probably as qualified as anybody. You're right, he doesn't have any money. If he has a downturn, he's a governor from Arkansas. We had a governor from Arkansas. But you know something? Money from Dobson's group would turn him around in a minute. Duncan Hunter, money from Dobson's group would turn them around in a minute. Both Christian men, both pro-life men, both pro-military. I mean, both, everything the conservative movement would want is in those guys.
Why aren't they here then? Why aren't they here at this conference?
Duncan Hunter's speaking tomorrow night.
Okay. But that's the only one of the candidates.
But he's speaking. He's coming here speaking tomorrow night.
I agree.
But you're right. Duncan Hunter lacks name ID.
Right.
But yet he's won Texas straw poll, came in second in a couple of other straw polls, won the Arizona straw poll. So a guy with no money, maybe $1 million, and low name IDs at 2%, has won a couple of straw polls.
And how's he going to do in Iowa or in?
You don't know. You got
New
some
Hampshire?
time. But again, we've allowed the dominant media to really make the decisions who are the top choices. I think Rudy Giuliani beats Hillary heads up. I think the New York operation beats Hillary
So
every single time.
you-
I think Mitt Romney's got his problems. Mitt Romney probably looks so perfect. He needs to be disheveled a little bit.
Yeah.
He needs to shake it up
That's
a little
right.
bit.
That's right.
Fred Thompson got in really late, no organization.
Yeah.
I mean, you got Duncan Hunter and those guys, Mike Huckabee, have a better organization than Fred Thompson has.
Is there
Organization
anybody
wins
that should
primaries.
be in there that isn't?
You know, there's probably a lot of people that probably could be in the race, except they don't want to put their family through the media circus that you put them through. Look what John Edwards is facing now the last couple of days. You know, also the media comes out, he had an affair. We have it on good authority from somebody underneath a rock.
Right.
He had an affair. This is what the candidates have to face anymore. My daughter asked me, Ashley, when the whole thing was going on in California with the governorship here, Dad, why don't you throw your hat in the ring? Why don't you run for governor? I said, because I don't want to come home every night and explain to you I'm not the rotten, cruel, despicable person the media makes me out to be today.
Well, I was going to say that. You know, you have.
That I am?
Not only do you have, not only do you as a talk show host, you have first of all great credibility on Fox. Number two, you have your own talk show host. Whatever you say is going to influence people. Along with, I'm not just saying you. I'm saying the conservative voices like Larry Elder and a variety of others. Okay, in this country, are a variety of individual conservative talk show hosts all have that ability to come together. And I'm just saying to you, though, are you going to eventually support a candidate before the
The problem is,
primary.
I mean, I thought about that a lot. I mean, but my problem is because my last name is Reagan,
Yes.
it does carry weight,
That's what I'm
I
saying,
believe. But then my father never endorsed in a primary and always supported the nominee of the party.
Okay.
So I haven't really made a decision yet whether I should endorse someone now
Right.
and/or wait till the party chooses the nominee and then support the nominee of the party, full force. Because one of the issues I also have is I am in the media, I do have a talk show, and I don't want to all of a sudden say I'm endorsing this guy and then nobody else talks to me because I'm endorsing
What are the
this
two
guy.
most important issues to you personally, and from your position, wherever you got
Well,
it?
I think there's probably three, and I
Okay.
think the war on terror
Right.
probably is absolutely number one.
Okay.
Because I really do understand it. That, to me, is number one. I think number two is the immigration issue.
Right.
And I think those are comboed up in many ways. And number three is taxes. The fact, what is the Republican president going to do to solidify where we are with our taxes today? Because you're going to have to fight the Democrats who are in the midst of wanting to write $1 trillion tax increase bill.
And how different would the world be if we elect a Republican as opposed to electing a Democrat in 2008? How different will our world be?
Oh, it'd be very, very different. I think because I think the Republicans to a man, Ron Paul isn't, but I think very strong on the war on terror and understand the war on terror. Immigration, certainly. With the Democrats, you will never get the wall built. Never, ever. Immigration will be free flow, back and forth. And I think, in tax system, I think they know. I mean, the world knows. They're going to sit there and raise our taxes. I think it's going to absolutely kill the economy of this country.
My partner
I think that's a
really
big
needs to
difference.
ask you a question.
Yeah,
before you-
yeah, go ahead.
Let me ask you, Michael, thank you
Yeah.
for being here. You got 40% of Republicans will never vote for Hillary. They may stay home, but they won't vote for her. You got 40% maybe Democrats, they're going to support her. How do we reach the decline of states, those in the middle, which are not organized in any third party?
Well, I think a big mistake that we've been doing lately is
They're going to make the decision
we've
as
been,
to who the next
you know,
president is.
let me tell you who's going to make the decision who's going to get elected. Christians. The Christian community is going to make the decision who the next president of the United States is going to be. If they sit on their hands, it will be a Democrat. If they get out and vote, it will be a Republican. And they will make the determination. In 2004, was that the last general election? I get so confused, they come at me so quick. You know, I was in Ohio for the President of the United States. What was our job in Ohio? To get the Christians out of the pews and into the voting booths. Because all the polls that were done from 1996 shows that when Christians come out and vote, that in fact conservatives win. When they do not, we do not win. And so it's going to be the Christian community. When you got Christian community who is then telling us who they're against instead of who they're for, and begin the process even discussing the third party, which gave us Bill Clinton. A third party will give us Hillary Clinton. They need to, in fact, get involved and again, understand, you know, what this is all about. I realize that there's the pro-life issue that's an important issue to them. It's important to me too. But you know something? You can elect God to the presidency of the United States. Chuck Schumer will not allow God to have his nominees reach the Supreme Court.
Or a
You
final-
got to put senators in there who are going to support the president of the United States that you are going to put in there. And so it's important that Christians get out and vote. So the question is, how do you get Christians out to vote? And you've got to talk to Christians and make them understand the realities of what's at stake here in America and the world.
Michael, we're taking too much of your time, and I just can't thank you enough for joining us on The Cutting Edge today. And please, I hope you'll lead us somewhere along the way to a titular leader of the conservative movement in the United States. Somewhere along in your travels through the Fox News Network or on your radio program, I hope you'll try to decipher someone, pick out a leader that's going to lead us down the right road here in the future.
If I could say one thing about Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, the last candidate that he went out and actively campaigned for Congress, was a young lady who was running against Jane Harman. And that young lady who ran against Jane Harman was his daughter, Maureen Reagan, pro-choice.
You know, the last time I saw your dad, we left at 12:30 in the morning from Mission Viejo. We drove up to the library. We stood in line for 5 hours to say goodbye.
Thank you.
I quote
Thank
your
you
dad
so
all the
much.
time, trust but verify everything. I'm a blogger.
You know what's going on
Trust but
today?
verify is there almost every time.
And you know the problem today is? We're trusting, we forgot to verify.
Thank
Say
you
that
much.
often.
We are just honored to be with Major General Paul Vallely, who's a well-known talk person on Fox News and a variety of other media locations. And you've just written a great book, and we don't have that handy. So would you tell me about the book you just wrote?
Well, the first book I wrote was with my co-author, Lieutenant General McInerney,
Right.
who I went to West Point with a couple years ahead of me. And that was called Endgame, a blueprint for victory and winning the war on terror.
Great.
And then the second book we did was called War Footing, Preparing the Western World as we need to prepare ourselves for today and tomorrow to protect the American people. And then the third book is Baghdad Ablaze,
Wow.
how to extinguish the fires in Iraq, and it's primarily about the threat from Iran.
Now, when was that?
That just came out
New
3
release.
weeks ago, new release. We made the release at the National Press Club in Washington. And
Fabulous.
prior to that, we went over and met with the Iranian opposition people in France and to solidify everything that we had written in the book. And like Endgame, everything we've said has come to pass so far. So we feel
Well,
very
you're
proud
the
of it.
exact person, if we could have picked one, and we weren't expecting to find you here, but here we are at the Western Conservative Conference, and here you are, and we just couldn't be more pleased to have you with
Oh,
us.
thank
Because
you.
there's some issues here that never get discussed that we really kind of want to know. One of the biggest things is my unit, I mentioned this to you earlier, the 2nd Armored Cav, it's now a Stryker Brigade. They're
Yes.
stationed there in Baghdad for their 15-month tour. I want to know how safe are the guys today as compared to, let's say, a year ago? How safe are our troops over in Baghdad?
Well, it's a great question. I just had a conference call last week with a very senior defense official. 2 weeks prior to that, 10 of us had a personal conference call with General Petraeus. But the general we had the conference call with last week is responsible for what we call force protection for Central Command. So my question to the general was that here we have our soldiers getting wounded and killed each day by these improvised explosive devices and the new penetrators, as they're called. And they're coming from Iran. And yet we're not doing anything about taking out the Iranian logistical bases that are providing these weapons of destruction within the borders. Now, General Petraeus has said in his conference call that we had with him that he's only responsible for within the borders of Iraq. He's not responsible outside. Well, the general we talked to is responsible, his command, Central Command, for outside the borders. So the question was, what are you doing to protect our forces in Iraq?
Do we have to go to Joint
And
Chiefs?
I can't get anybody to answer that question. They all shy away from it. And we have the intelligence. We know where the factories are. We know the 2 primary crossing points out of 16
Right.
that are being used in convoy, bringing in all sorts of goods into Iraq from Iran, and they're being hidden in these convoys. And so I'm very frustrated that we're not protecting our forces today, particularly from the outside influences.
General, what we did an interview with Gary Burnson. It was the Jawbreaker team that went to Afghanistan. Really impressive mission over there, as you well know. Is that what is going on now? Do we have CIA operatives looking at these areas in Iran, and maybe that's a conflict of power?
Well, I can tell you what, our intelligence is not very good.
Okay.
But the best intelligence we're getting is out of the Mujahideen al-Khalq, which is the People's Mujahideen of Iran, the opposition group.
Interesting.
That are based in France.
Wow.
90% of the intelligence we get comes from that, but yet we don't give them credit for it, and we have them on the terrorist list. The State Department does.
Interesting.
Ali Reza Shahbarzadeh introduced and provided the United States intelligence community with the nuclear weapons program of Iran 4 years ago. And he's written a book called The Iran Threat. Now, the State Department will not recognize, but they will take all the intelligence that we get from inside Iran, which is processed through the Mujahideen al-Khalq. Now, that hasn't been on the air, it hasn't been publicized other than what I've said and General McInerney has said. And so Baghdad Ablaze talks a lot about that, the current book we have out.
Okay.
You know, I'm sorry
Larry.
to jump in.
No,
but
go
That's
ahead.
fine.
Look what happened just now with Israel on September 4th or 9th,
Yes.
whatever it was. No one's talking about it.
No.
Other than, gee, you did a flyover.
Right,
And I guess when the president was asked the question, his answer was no comment.
right.
Well, it's national security, obviously, that you
The
can't tell
point,
everything.
the point that we have been making, I have been making for years now, this is an unconventional war, not a conventional war, but yet we have conventional generals and admirals running the war. It should be our unconventional generals and admirals who are running this war. And we should be taking out those targets at 2 o'clock in the morning and making them disappear in Syria as well as Iran, and do what the Israelis have done by taking out a specified target in Syria. And the reason they don't want to talk about it, because it looks like it was a nuclear development site supported by the North Koreans as well as the Iranians. So we know what's going on over there, but we cannot get, even the senior officials at the Defense Department, we can't count on anything coming out of the State Department to do anything. And certainly we can't understand the Bush administration in not taking action to protect our forces
You don't
over
make
there.
us feel warm and cozy about our guys being over there right now, and when you do that, it's okay. We understand that there are dangers, no
Sure.
matter walking down the
Well, there's
street.
enough dangers in Iraq already
Of course
with
there are.
Al-Qaeda,
Of course.
with the militias, let alone outside influences
Correct.
coming in. We have Hezbollah from southern Lebanon, which
No
is
one
the
talks
key
about that
terrorist
much either.
organization supported by Syria, a surrogate state of Iran is what they really are,
Right.
training the militias inside Iraq, and we do nothing about it.
Well-
So you asked me about the safety of our troops.
Right.
Don't put the generals and admirals in a box and expect them to win. That's what we did in Vietnam.
Isn't this
What-
what
what
we
is-
did in Korea?
In a way, we did.
All right,
Absolutely.
One
we
of
did.
the questions that
You're
I,
absolutely right, Larry.
sorry, General, but one of the questions I have that no one seems to be addressing at all.
Yes.
Is the English or the British are leaving Basra.
Yes.
Southern province.
Yes.
And the Canadians are gone and everybody's gone.
Right.
So that leaves a hole in the system
Yes.
there. And they're letting the militias, the local militias, seemingly run things and just pay them bucks to take care of stuff. Is that what we're doing, basically?
Well, we do have some special operations forces down in the Basra area working with the local people. Now, whether that's going to hold together or the influence of Iran on the Shiite community in southern Iraq, if that gains a foothold, and that's their intention, by the way, is to really take over southern Iraq first with a Shia uprising. And we'll only have a few special ops forces there, but I think the British basically have given up and they're going home.
Larry, I got one thing I'll forget if I don't. There was a show on 60 Minutes about the Kurdish province.
Yes.
And how it was just like America there. I mean,
Yes.
it was really.
By the way, I'll be going there probably next month.
Excellent, excellent.
on
So
the-
you'll be back.
I'm
in
a member of the
reporting.
American Kurdish Friendship League, which is a
Oh,
newly formed
wonderful.
organization.
At any rate, you have this thing, and then you have the Basra thing, and then you have the Baghdad thing, and the Anbar province thing, and pretty soon, we have to question the Biden thing, which is the partitioning and the tripartite or three-state solution.
Right.
What's your position on that?
Well, I would like to see Iraq held together, and I will be going to Kurdistan, so I can give you a better report, in a month or so. Anbar province is a success right now. Most of Baghdad is a success, and that's because we have the best general over there that we have, and that's General Petraeus, and I know him personally. And he is a counterinsurgency expert. He's using the special ops to work with the Sunni tribal leaders. And that's what we should have been doing from the beginning. We had enough time, I could talk to you about the plan that Bush did not approve in Iraq.
Okay.
And that would have been a very successful plan if
Well,
we had
that-
done
you know,
it.
what
But
happened-
that's another
Yeah,
interview.
issue.
But
Right.
the biggest strategic mistake we made was going in there as an occupier. On that day when Saddam fell, we had 230 Iraqis sitting up in Kurdistan, ready to come in and take over the government.
You know,
Bush backed it off, brought in this coalition provisional authority under Paul Bremer, totally screwed up the strategy over there, so we then became
Really?
occupiers. The plan was get out of the cities, no green zone, let the Iraqis take over, let them work it all out. We would secure the border and provide the security from outside, which we knew was very, very important. That was the other plan, by the way, so we can go into that in more detail later
Okay,
on.
yeah, there was, when they found so much money and they found so much.
Lots of money.
Wow. I mean, that was.
We
a
could have
shock.
brought back the Iraqi intelligence people, the army. You know, you sort of cut off the bad guys that work for Saddam, but you know, a lot of them went over to Syria and they're still there.
One of the things I'm gonna let Larry ask you a bunch of stuff,
Sure.
but the first thing that I gotta ask you though, is that you've been through Republican administrations, Democrat administrations, you've been through all the things in Kosovo and all those other things down the road, right? Weren't you involved in all
32
that?
years. Well,
Yeah.
I wasn't involved in Kosovo.
Glad to hear it.
So-
Anyway, moving right along, I just was going to ask you though, what difference could the American people really expect whether a Republican or a Democrat gets into office in 2008 regarding Afghanistan and regarding Iraq?
All right, let me answer it this way. Now, whether you supported Secretary Rumsfeld or not, I had lunch with him in 2002, about 12 of us, and he said, Paul, the United States is not structured to deal with today and tomorrow. Our government is not structured to deal with today and tomorrow. And I'll tell you what, that is so true. So no matter who gets in, and Newt Gingrich is very focused on this right now in his American Innovations program, that we have got to change the way we do business to protect America, because the way it's going now, we have nothing happening in Congress that's going to secure America. We have some good people, but for the most part, a lack of leadership and a lack of change, innovation that needs to be made to protect the American people.
Any one or two little tweaky, specifics you might mention in that regard?
Well, first of all, you've got a State Department that I can't look back and figure out what the heck they've done in 6 years, or even before that with Madeleine Albright. I mean, you can go back a couple decades. So you have a very ineffective State Department at the highest level, okay, that is not on a diplomatic offensive in this global war against radical Islam. You've got a very bureaucratic Defense Department, okay, very bureaucratic. Right now, the only one involved in this global war against radical Islam is really the Defense Department. And Treasury Department's doing some things. The FBI is getting a little better. Our intelligence still needs a long way to go. So these are structural changes that have to be made to secure America. And we've got to be on the offensive because they are out to destroy us. And the global caliphate, the spread of radical Islam around the world.
It's not a phony deal.
Europe is a good example of what's happening.
You mentioned 2002.
Yeah.
We interviewed Cap Weinberg at the Nixon Library. And I asked him a couple of questions. One, is Iran a clear and present danger?
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, he wasn't so sure. I also asked him, do we have an exit
Why didn't he go
strategy?
back to '79 when they attacked our embassy and started this whole global jihad?
Oh, we talked about,
I'm not
bailing
sure.
out of Lebanon.
Yeah,
And
I like
left
Camp
Lebanon.
Weinberger, but that was a weak answer. We had lots of information on them and what they were doing with Hezbollah, and they killed 241 of our Marines.
Yep.
That happened
We
under
talked about that.
Reagan, yeah.
Oh, we talked about that. Thinking
He probably didn't want to talk too much about it, though. He's a good man, though.
You watched
but,
the show. It's very fast moving. I think it was 18 minutes with 18 questions,
Yeah.
one after another. We've got diplomatic problems. We have Turkey, because if you create a three-state, you have a Turkestan, as you just
Yeah.
said.
Look at what we
Turkey's
just
not
did
gonna
to
be happy.
Turkey. They just pulled their ambassador, yesterday.
I didn't know that.
Because of the Armenian vote.
Because of the Armenian
Yeah.
issue.
So
They
here
didn't
we
know-
got,
they didn't know where
Turkey's
we were
been our
going.
friend for years. We have air bases there.
That's right.
They're under the
Let us fly over.
radar. There's a lot of things going on, but you see what I mean about diplomacy and the way
Well,
we
look at
treat
Pakistan.
our friends?
With Bernstein, and we talked
Yeah.
about Jawbreaker.
Right.
And then they go over to Tora Bora, and they go over the other side, and
Right.
we can't do anything. It's like the Yellow River.
We could have done something,
Yes, we
couldn't we?
could've.
Right?
Yes, we could have.
Remember what Bush said September 14th, 2001? If you're a nation and you're a terrorist, you're a nation that support terrorism, basically no sanctuaries. We should have learned that lesson. But yet we have sanctuaries in Pakistan. The Pakistanis now are, with the soldiers that were killed in the action that took place last week. I reported, and you go back and look on Fox News in 2002 after Tora Bora, I had intelligence reports that Al-Qaeda and the Taliban moved to Peshawar and set up a headquarters there, and guess what's been reported in the last month? They're in Peshawar.
Which is next to, in Pakistan?
Yeah.
Right.
Right across the border.
Right
from
across the border, so
Jalalabad. They all flushed out. Now, I love General Frank, CENTCOM at the time, but I called that thing on television with General McInerney. There was no blocking forces, no recon out, no special ops along the border that had called in airstrikes and blocked those 4 major corridors going from Afghanistan into Pakistan.
You know, you stand very strongly on this war on terror, and we do with you. But the detractors all have that same comment, and I'm just asking for you to just respond to them. They all say Bush lied. They all said that there was no imminent danger from Iraq. They all say
WMDs.
There was no MDDs. There wasn't anything. They didn't even have a rubber band to shoot at us, and that this was all just a made-up thing. What would you say to them?
Okay. I reported on the O'Reilly factor in May of 2003. Now, you can go back and look on television where I got the information out of the Middle East, and I can tell you exactly where it came from. Satellite photos of the 18-wheelers going from Baghdad to Damascus between January the 15th and March the 8th before Saddam fell, loaded with WMDs, and we know the names of the Russian general, the 2 Russian colonels that helped in transferring the WMD to 3 sites in Syria and 1 in the Bekaa Valley.
Wow.
And guess what Syria has today? You ask about the Syrian takedown of that installation, but 2 months ago, they had a major explosion in Syria. Didn't hit the papers much.
Really?
Okay? What it was a Shahab 3 missile. They were loading a mustard gas warhead on it, and it blew up. Killed, I understand, 15 Iranians who were working with them. Now, the supplies that came out of Iraq that our intelligence should have verified are in storage in Syria, and I'll stand by that today. And so will a certain intelligence group out of the Middle East that has the satellite photos. This was all given to President Bush in Negroponte a year and a half ago. The word I got back is the reason the Bush administration will not talk about it is that Bush made a deal with Putin because the Russians involved in moving it. So that's a side story.
General, thank you so very much for joining us on The Cutting Edge, and God bless you. Thanks for doing all that. We're going to, if you'll just do me one big favor, just repeat that last book that you just wrote, the one that just got released.
Baghdad Ablaze, and you can find it on our website, www.standupamerica.radio.com.
God bless you for coming. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, Ron.
And now we're with the chairman of the American Conservative Union, David Keene, who's here to and he's put a real mark, a paw print, as my wife would say, on this Western Conservative conference here in the first one. So tell us about, first of all, American Conservative Union is the organization that you have founded, or explain it.
No, the American Conservative Union is the largest traditional conservative activist organization. We've got about 800,000 members, and ACU was founded actually in the weeks following the Goldwater defeat in 1964, and has been in existence since then.
So I probably belonged 3 or 4 times and didn't know it.
We had our 40th anniversary dinner a couple of years ago. President Bush spoke there. We are the sponsors of the National Conservative Political Action Conference, which began in 1973 with Ronald Reagan and 123 attendees. Just last year, we had about 6,000 attendees in Washington for our 3-day conference. And it has really become sort of the must-stop for conservative activists and for aspiring conservative politicians or people seeking conservative support.
And that's exactly why we're here today and why we want to talk to you about this. There are several candidates running on both sides for the presidency. We've narrowed it down to 3 of the front runners, they call them, Fred Thompson and Rudolph Giuliani, and of course Mitt Romney. Now, your organization, how do you choose to endorse a candidate, or how would they go about getting your endorsement?
Well, the organization itself does not, our PAC can, but the organization itself does not endorse candidates. What we do is we invite each of them to our conference so that they can talk to conservatives. And all of the major candidates and most of the minor candidates on the Republican side were at our conference this last year, with the sole exception of John McCain, who refused to come. The
Is
others,
there a reason for why he didn't do that?
we've had touchy relations with Senator McCain for some years, beginning with his sponsorship of campaign finance reform. And there's a sense among conservatives, which I think is accurate, that he doesn't like them, and that he gets very personal about things, and conservatives are not really that comfortable with him. It's ironic in a sense, because in many ways John McCain, over the course of his career, has a more conservative record than some of the candidates who conservatives don't have a problem with. So,
Right.
But as you know, when you're talking about a presidential candidate in particular, you're talking about more than simply a voting record. You're talking about how would this person as president utilize the power he has, how would he respond to crises that we can't even imagine, and so it's an evaluation of personality, issues, positions, sort of a sense of how stable they are and all of that.
Right.
And John
This
McCain is not a
particular
favorite.
event, I hate to interrupt, but we're a little short
Sure.
on time. But in this particular event, it's the perpetuation and the continuation of the Reagan legacy.
Here,
And,
yes.
It's the mission, the basic mission statement
Right.
of this particular event. Now, having said that, you came here with some purpose, I'm sure, and that purpose is to find a candidate, or...
No, my purpose for coming here and the importance of this is
Yeah.
that in the history of the conservative movement, conferences of this nature have become incredibly important, because they bring conservatives together. They create the bonds of family and of a movement that are so important as you go forward into political action. And they give conservatives a chance to network and talk, in this case, about candidates. So my mission here is to tell them that this is an important thing that they're doing, and that they ought to keep doing it year after year, because I think it'll have tremendous impact ultimately on the politics of the region.
One of the issues of most import is that they've already kind of submitted the fact that Hillary and Barack Obama will be the Democratic respondents in this race, possibly. That's the rumor of the day. At any rate, in order to challenge them and to win, what type of candidates do the Republicans have any candidates
Well,
that
I
could possibly
think
challenge and win
it's
that?
interesting because, in fact, Michael Reagan in the opening session today talked a little bit about the fact that the candidates are comparing themselves to his father. In a sense, because a politician like Reagan or like Roosevelt in the Democratic Party comes along at best once in a generation and then defines things for that party, follow-on candidates have a hard time, because party activists, if you go back in history, when Truman came along, they said, this guy's a schmuck. I mean, he doesn't compare to Roosevelt. Well, history looks at him a little differently than that. So now we have candidates who are going before the Republican primary electorate, and voters are saying, I don't see any Ronald Reagan out there. Fact of the matter is they aren't going to see a Ronald Reagan any more than the Democrats were going to see a Franklin Roosevelt. Those folks don't come along very often. So they're judging candidates who in their minds don't measure up to the ruler that they've put out there, and that's unfair in a sense to those candidates. But what it has done is it's forced Republicans and conservatives to look at the candidates and say, which of these candidates, none of whom we have an emotional tie to, who in a sense we had to Reagan, which of these candidates would really bring the best mix of talents, of issues, positions, and an ability to communicate and win an election to the table. So in a very real way, the decision that they're looking at this year is more intellectual than emotional. And so you see, if you talk to people at this conference, you'll see people that are for all three of these front runners, and some that aren't for any of them, but are for some of the folks further down.
Sure.
And they've all got their reasons. The problem is that they're all different reasons. We talked about our national conference a minute ago.
Right.
And we do a straw poll there. And that, one of the things that we ask in that straw poll, we ask some questions so we can break the movement into its component parts, which in a very simple sense consist of economic conservatives, social conservatives, and national defense conservatives. At our last conference, when the straw poll took place, it was won by Mitt Romney. Rudy Giuliani was second, and Sam Brownback was third.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, Giuliani had the national defense conservatives, Romney had the economic conservatives, Brownback had the social conservatives, and there was virtually no crossover.
Interesting.
A candidate like Reagan, or a successful candidate, has to be able to appeal to all parts of the base.
Right.
And that's what none of these candidates at this point has been able to do. And that's why a lot of Republicans looking at it say there must be somebody better, which is why in the initial stages of his campaign, we had Fred Thompson, who was essentially none of the above. And so they were saying, gee, Fred, if you can just put this together, we'd like to be for you. They didn't know whether he could. They still don't know whether he can.
Right.
But one of these candidates will ultimately do that. And when that candidate does it, he'll be viable in the general election. If a candidate somehow gets nominated without doing that, which I frankly think is unlikely, that candidate could be crippled going into the general election, because the first thing you have to do is you have to make sure your own house is in order if you're going to win a general election in this
Right.
country. And that's what these primaries are all about.
Would you say, an interesting note that not anyone's really addressing yet, but would you say the passing of Jerry Falwell will have any ramifications on the selection of a candidate for the
Not really.
Republicans?
Reverend Falwell was pretty much out of politics. Falwell, for those of your viewers who aren't familiar, was the founder of the Moral Majority many years ago,
Right.
and was really the religious figure who began the activation of the so-called religious right. In past years, one of the problems that we've had is that the two groups in American society least likely to vote statistically are blacks in the Democratic Party and evangelicals in the Republican Party.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
It is true, and that's why when they became organized, they came out. But without the organization, they tend not to. It actually makes, when you think about it, most Americans, and this is particularly true of these folks, are not obsessed with politics.
Sure.
I'm obsessed with politics. The people that watch your program are probably obsessed with politics, but most Americans have better things to do,
Right.
or at least things that they think are better to do.
Right.
And evangelicals have tended to be non-political on the one hand, and in addition to that, they've sort of thought politics was a little smarmy. I don't know how they ever got that impression, but they have.
Right.
So Falwell's importance was that he began the process of explaining to these people that if they wanted to influence the way that their country was going, they had to actually vote. And that
So
was
there's
his
really a
importance.
vacuum then, really out there at this point in time. There isn't any real evangelical leader that's out there beating the drums anymore, is there?
No, there isn't an organization. There are a lot of leaders. There are a lot of
course.
rhetorical leaders. But after Falwell came the Christian Coalition,
Right.
which really did organize and get people out. One of the problems that the Bush campaign faced in the 2000 race, and one of the reasons it was closer than it might otherwise have been, was that machinery no longer existed.
Mm-hmm.
And so the evangelical vote that they expected dropped off. It dropped off not because people disliked their candidate or whatever. It dropped
Right.
off because these are people who do not put, in many cases, voting at the top of their agenda.
Let me ask you this: you've been sitting really in a catbird seat in your organization and really watching this very carefully. What do you think is going to be the ramifications of either a Democrat being elected or a Republican in 2008? How much difference is there going to be in our country, and based on that, on who wins?
I think there's going to be an incredible difference. You know, we at ACU for 35 years have been raiding Congress. And while there's a popular impression that the parties don't make much difference, in fact, over that time, the parties have gotten more and more and more different. One of the reasons we don't have much cooperation on a partisan sense today is that these two parties view the world so differently that they can't conceivably come together on many, many issues. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party, in a very broad sense, are the pro-government party and the non-government party. The Republicans, in a broad sense, are far less likely to grow government than are the Democrats. That doesn't mean that
They won't.
but
Yeah.
it means they resist it. In the current Congress, we've already seen that the Democratic leadership desperately wants to increase taxes on almost everything.
Right.
Hillary Clinton has already suggested that she's going to pay for many of her programs by increasing the death tax or inheritance tax that most Republicans want to eliminate. There's going to be, and there has been a change in Democratic rhetoric over the last few years. It used to be that the Democrats argued that we needed higher taxes to pay for their programs. The problem that they face is that the deficit's falling because lower taxes generate more rather than less revenue. The rhetoric changed with the takeover, so now it's more a class warfare kind of situation, that we don't need to raise taxes so much to raise money as to punish the people who have too much of it already.
I got to let Larry jump in because we're almost out of time. Any questions for Mr. Kane?
Thank you for being with us today.
Pleasure.
It's interesting, when we look at the camps and everybody talks to Democrats and Republicans, if it's 40% Democrats and 40% Republicans, how do we get the undecideds, decline of state in the middle? Who's going to win them? Because they're going to control the outcome of this next election.
Larry, the odds are they won't, and let me tell you why. In 1984, when Ronald Reagan ran for re-election, and when they're doing polls, they use certain screens to try and identify different people. The screens they used indicated that 18% of the electorate was in the middle, were persuadables, as they call them. Ronald Reagan won 70% of those and swept the country. They used the same screen in 2004, and they found that not 18%, but 5% were in the middle, and yet only half the eligible voters vote. They also found, and this is true of both parties, that among those people who don't vote, the attitudes are roughly the same as those who do. So you've got 5% of the people in the middle, and you've got 50% out there in the country. So when you're putting together a campaign, where's the gold? The gold is finding people who already agree with you and getting them to the polls. And that difference in the political demography of the country does much to explain the difference in the way campaigns are run today and they were run 20 years ago.
David Keene, we are totally out of time. I want to thank you so much for joining us on The Cutting Edge. I hope you get everything you want out of this convention, and we win in November of 2008. Thank you so much for joining us on The Cutting Edge.
David?